But one thing I really want to say is that knowledge is not owned by anyone. It should not be bought and sold. It is not something that can be held from people justly. Knowledge is strength, it is empowerment, and we all deserve the self-determination that comes from being educated. The reason why we are here today is because we want to cancel all student debt and target the nucleus of this country's power, which is the financial power. This is just the first step. This is just the first step. Because we are radically thinking about what change looks like. We are radically thinking about what it looks like to have financial power in the hands of the people that actually create it. I did not get to finish college yet. I still haven't figured out what I want to do, y'all, but I have taken a couple of semesters and I have accrued some student loan debt that I'm not sure of the quantity of right now. But there are so many people like myself that never finish and that die with that debt. Straight like that. It is unfair and it is unjust because just because people want a better life for themselves, they want a better opportunity for themselves, especially as Black people, that we have to be punished by a debt that literally weighs us down and stops our upward mobility.
Let's get ready to grumble! Folks, you know, most Americans carry some sort of student debt, it seems like. Seems like everybody has student debt. Why is that? Well, because we haven't placed a priority on making sure American citizens are ready and able to participate in the quote-unquote American dream, which is largely the American nightmare, as you and I both know. We all know this, and we all live with it daily, and we try to forget about it because to think about it constantly would be like vein-splitting stuff. We wouldn't want to live through this kind of hellscape if we understood the debt peonage, the debt slavery we're all in, right? Why should it be any different with student debt? Student debt right there is ballooning. We are talking about $2 trillion plus in student debt alone. $2 trillion. And it's just been sitting there like a ticking time bomb now throughout the entire pandemic. Yay, rah, that we haven't had to pay it during that time period, but it's just sitting there floating around like a stinky wet egg fart, waiting to be sniffed up like you're on the elevator. You know, the guy that stands there in the corner and just like, what, me? I didn't do it. Well, yeah, this is the egg fart known as the student debt bomb. It is just sitting there waiting to explode on each and every one of us. So what exactly does the impact of this have on society today? Well, let's just think about this for a minute. Right here, right now, it's just sitting there. It's literally not doing anything. No one is making payments on those loans. And quite frankly, no one is dying either. So how is that even possible? How is it even possible that your student debt, by not making payments for almost 3 years now, isn't somehow or another creating mass calamity to the world around you? Well, we all know, we should know anyway, that when the federal government steps in, the federal government neither has nor doesn't have dollars. And the federal government can make sure that everything is hunky-dory. Anything that can be purchased in U.S. dollars, the government can cover. Anything that is denominated in U.S. dollars, the federal government can wipe out instantly. It can handle any of that because it is the god of the dollar. So why in the world would a government that's there supposedly by and for the people, why a government that is supposed to be taking care of we the people, the general welfare of we the people, why would that same government pride itself in enslaving students of all ages and varieties coming out the chute? Well, I think we all understand the way feudalism was. I think we all understand the obligation that serfs had. You do your time and then they release you with a pittance or whatever, and you go about your life, right? Well, in this particular case, we have a different form of slavery. There's no walls around us. There's no physical chains per se. No, instead, it's the debt slave deal, right? And when we go back to the 2020 election, and if you look at Joe Biden's very own website, He talks about eradicating student debt. Now, mind you, this guy is a neoliberal pile of junk. Okay? He is. There's nothing about him that screams, I love people, let me make the world a better place. Everything about Joe Biden screams, let me make your life just a little bit fucking harder, right? So what does Joe Biden do? Joe Biden says people making up to $125,000 a year will get their undergraduate degrees taken care of. That's what his website says. Take a look. Go to joebiden.whatever and take a look. And you're going to see that one of the key things that Joe Biden said is that for people earning less than $125,000 a year, he will wipe out their bachelor's degree, their undergraduate loans. Now, that leaves a lot of people out, and you can sit there and hate the people that are 1 inch above the pig slop, but they're still part of that 99%. And in fact, the more you get into this punitive stuff, thinking that some people should pay and others shouldn't, instead of just saying, hey, let's make college part of being a U.S. citizen, part of being a human, part of the investment in society. But no, we've got this idea that you paid your debt, so therefore everybody should pay theirs. And it simultaneously holds back anything. And they know it. They know it. They know it full well. But what you've got is a bunch of these loan servicing companies out there, these federal loan servicing companies. And what do? They go out there and they bid against each other to see who is going to be the one that gets the most loans to serve. Because they don't make a lot of money per se on the loans. It's not like the loans are making big bucks for these loan servicing companies. They make money, and it's big money, but it's not big money just here you go. It's big money based on volume, high volume transactions. Okay. So the federal government then looks around at the different Fed loan servicing groups and says, here you go. I'll give you X number of loans to service. I'll give you X number of loans to service. And what happens? They make a lot of money, but you and us discharging our debt, no, we're not allowed to discharge our debt. Joe Biden himself, the man who's supposed to cure this problem, created this problem by making student loans impossible to discharge. Well, largely impossible to discharge. I'm sure you can find a needle in a haystack version of how you can get out of your student debt. Pay your payments every day perfectly on time for 10 years. And if you did some sort of public service, then we'll wipe out your debt. Sure. I'm sure that's the way it'll work. People carrying $125,000 in student debt for a 2 and 3 year degree, when what they ended up doing was having to bundle in living expenses on top of all that because of the global financial crisis. Most of us have forgotten already. I don't know why. Why the fuck do we forget these sorts of things? Most of us have forgotten how many people were displaced in the global meltdown of 2008 and 2009 when Obama was busy telling everyone we got to eat our peas and make tough decisions. You remember that? When Obama was making excuses for all the different JP Morgans of the world, when he was making excuses for the city and countrywides and all the rest of them, when he was busy putting people in place like the Paulsons and the Rubins of the world to commit complete and utter control fraud. When you look at these people that are in the revolving door of Wall Street, back to government, back to Wall Street, and vice versa, they walk in rich, they walk out richer, these kinds of folks. This whole thing, this whole student debt thing got even worse when everybody had to reinvent themselves as mass layoffs to career level people came sweeping through, people that are in their 50s, 60s even, trying to reinvent themselves because they don't have a pot to piss in. They have no pension. They have no retirement. They have no nothing. They got to work until they die. Yes, this is the student debt that Joe Biden is still sitting on, but he keeps kicking the can down. Keeps kicking the can down. It was May 31st. It was before that. It was going to be in January. It was May. Now it's August. Okay. Now people are busy trying to figure out how to balance their lives and prepare for these student loan payments to kick back in yet again in August. You get a few months to breathe, but what kind of bullshit is that? If you can put it off for 3 years, you can put it off for eternity. You can wipe it out. You can literally wipe this debt out. And it's the best part of this. I want you to understand how incredibly beautiful this is. Joe Biden, without even having congressional support, without even worrying about Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, none of them would have any impact on this. Joe Biden, by executive order, could wipe out all of student debt immediately. In fact, the Debt Collective and others have put a thing right on his desk, an executive order written up for him to eradicate student debt. Jordan was just busy talking with the leader of the Debt Collective about this very issue.
What is your reaction to this extension, but also obviously that's not enough, and you guys are calling for full-on canceling the debt, and in this case, we're threatening a strike if the pause wasn't extended again.
It is no surprise that President Biden extended the pause because we forced him. We went to DC and took action and showed that debtors have power. Also, the administrative burden on simply turning student debt payments back on makes it quite nearly impossible. So there's a lot of elements working in our favor here. We, this is a moment where we are definitely pushing way beyond an extension to the pause, right? The pause was a Trump era policy that actually didn't include everyone who has student loans. So there's folks with private student debt, people who have FFEL loans who actually aren't included in the loan. So who actually aren't included in this pause. So, we're grateful for an extension to the pause. We know millions of borrowers who are now able to save billions of dollars in their pockets and use that towards putting food on the table and paying for other necessary expenses. But it's simply not enough. And we're not going to see the economic and financial and political results that we need with an extension to the pause. We've got to cancel all of it.
Student debt could be wiped out instantly. Do not act like we could only give $10,000 to this person, $10,000 to that person. If you stand on your head in the corner, pat your head, rub your tummy, and wear a tinfoil hat, that somehow or another you'll qualify. The fact is, we all should qualify. It's an investment. Main Street is busy carrying the training, education, and development of every corporation in America. We're busy strapping our children with a debt bag on their back. A debt bag on their back that they can never discharge. Before they have their first kiss, before they get laid even, before they have their first legal drink, they're carrying a huge, huge, huge debt just to participate in the employment system. This kind of discipline of labor shouldn't surprise anyone, given that Joe Biden just now accidentally creeped out a little bit of pro-union support with the Amazon unionization and then quickly walked it back. Joe Biden is no friend of the people. But more importantly, though, sadly, while we have people rallying and gathering in D.C., Nina Turner up there, up on her haunches, speaking boldly about eliminating student debt. Grand plan. I love you. Thank you so much for this beautiful thing. But you're not addressing the key problems here. It doesn't matter whether Republicans think they shouldn't pay for your student debt. They're not. The government will wipe it out with public money, not taxpayer dollars. Easy. No problem at all. Just just drop it. No problem. So why isn't it doing that? Why is Joe Biden sitting on an executive order that if he were to sign it, would create a windfall of Democrats getting elected? It would be the single greatest act a president has taken under executive order in my lifetime. It would be the single most freeing. You could let my people go. You could hear it.
Yes! Oh, yeah! Can you feel that, buddy? Huh? Huh? Huh?
Instead of the creeping death plagues of the Egyptian empire when Moses is sitting there fighting with Pharaoh. Let my people go. Pestilence, frogs, creeping death. Instead of all that, Joe Biden could, with a flick of the wrist, sign that little piece of paper. And voila, No more student debt. Why won't he do it? Let's get into that right now. Round 2. So what happens when you think that we have to discipline inflation on the backs of the poor? What happens when you think that the rich, who are already getting richer with increases in interest rate payments, who are getting rich because they're price gouging, who are getting rich because money makes money even while they're sleeping through the stock market and through the fire sector, and the rich just keep getting richer? Why wouldn't we just go ahead and dump the pain and suffering on the poor? Because inflation created by oligarchs and this friggin' inflation created by multinational corporations price gouging, by the petrol industry literally breaking out their pen, unlike Jolton Joe Biden, and marking prices up. Why wouldn't they do that?
I'm not going to apologize. I'm a coxman.
Well, let me tell you, there is a school of thought right now that believes that if Joe Biden were to eliminate student debt, he would be creating inflationary pressures because, after all, people believe that that's somehow or another printing money. People believe somehow or another that by allowing people to not have that debt strapped on their back, it's going to create inflation. Well, we got inflation. Why do we have inflation? It's certainly not because the people have buying power. No, we're coming to a stagflation point, folks. We have got a great big Deutsche Bank waving the wand, waving the flag, saying the U.S. is heading for recession. Why do you think the U.S. would be heading towards recession? Because of a lack of spending, folks. It's spent before, but that money's dried up. It's been sucked up into the fire sector, into the rich people's hands. Now, the contraction is going to come because we, the people, don't have money coming into our pockets. But you've got these right-wing, sound money, neoclassical bullshit fucking economists that are busy trying to sell you the idea that Biden should reinstate the freaking student debt payments, because that way it can control inflation. So who are you putting the inflation control on? Who are you burdening with this concept of inflation control? Every son of a bitch with a goddamn student loan. That's just going to carry the weight for that bullshit. Think about that for a minute. You're going to balance the price gouging, inflation. You're going to balance the bullshit with the oil crisis that is created by oligarchs playing oligarch games. You're going to balance that out. You're going to bring inflation down by further burdening Jane and Joe Sixpack, who happen to try to go to college believing in the American dream. But voila. They're already not making payments now, folks. We're already looking at a recession bearing down on us right now because of the government spigot being turned off. Joe Biden, as we've talked about previously, with a $1.3 trillion desire to reduce the deficit. So let's think about that for a minute. You're going to reduce the deficit. You're going to further take away disposable income from Jane and Joe Public, who would keep the economy going at a trickle anyway, by reinstating student debt. You want to talk about doubling down on a massive, massive recession? That's what we're talking about right there. And we're talking about grotesque means. We're talking Machiavellian means if they're trying to balance that on the backs of the little people. But this is the entire game here, folks. They've convinced us all that spending equals inflation, but that's not true. It's not true. So by eliminating student debt, which we talked about, what you would do is you would give everybody purchasing power. What do people with additional purchasing power tend to do? Sure, they might save a little bit, which is a demand leakage. But most likely, what are they going to do? They're going to go on a fucking vacation. They're going to maybe pick up maybe a PlayStation. I don't know. Maybe they'll get their teeth fixed that they've allowed to rot out of their mouth because they didn't have any disposable income and their insurance blows monkey chunks. Maybe, just maybe, they might pay their electric bill or buy a fucking loaf of bread. Maybe they buy additional formula for their baby. But either way, what ends up happening when people have more money, when people have the ability to exercise the pent-up demand they personally have, to create the aggregate demand that creates an economy, it puts pressure on businesses to produce more goods and services to meet the demand. So now you're growing capital versus finance capital. See, companies have largely become stock portfolios. They're not actually, in any way, shape, or form, producing goods and services in the way that they should and could. So the idea of supply chains supporting the overall economy is a foreign concept because they're no longer in the business of producing goods and services. They're money manager capitalism. Money manager capitalism. And it's in this vein that we see the investment community buying up everything we need and want to survive, and then raising prices to increase their profit. It's not about creating new things. It's not about enhancing our lives. It's about sucking every last bit of profit out of a community of people, a world, a globe that doesn't have any fat to trim. This right here, this concept of balancing inflation on the backs of Jane and Joe is terrifying. Because one of the things that is always missed, we have been convinced since the 70s that printing money creates inflation. But rapid increase of money doesn't increase inflation because we're not on a fixed exchange regime. Prices are set by the government when it buys goods and services. And that's why you see colleges and universities driving the cost through the roof, building amenities, building these universities that create all of the grift and create all of the gentrification in these poor neighborhoods as they buy up, they become the single largest purchaser of all the properties in the area. Further driving up the cost of education, further making it more exclusive. It's a game of amenities, as Devarian Baldwin states. A game of amenities that the rich love to play into. But the average person who's busy subsidizing the training, education, and development systems of these same corporations, as they suck every bit of the community up into their vacuum and they just swallow up everything of value, we end up in a situation, horrible situation, where we can't get out of it. And so the idea of inflation is always left by disciplining labor, by laying people off, by cutting the fat, by eliminating the social space, the social framework, the public framework, the public purpose, goods and services for you and I. But you don't see them flinching as they send money to Ukraine. You don't see them flinching as they find ways of bolstering the military. You never find them flinching as they invade another country. Because see, when it comes to scarcity of money, it's only there when they're trying to discipline you and I. It's only there when they try to discipline you and I. It's not even fun to laugh anymore about it. You can mock it. You can joke about it. You might have to do that to stay sane as it happens. But people like Nancy Pelosi, who are heavily invested in Amazon, who are heavily invested in everything that screws you and I, people like Joe Biden, who sit there and pay lip service to caring about the regular people in Main Street and so forth, while simultaneously avoiding the one pen stroke he could make to tip this whole thing and give everybody a real chance. And to further pour hot coals on your head, if the Democrats really cared about being reelected, if they really cared about winning, they would do these things that are highly popular with Jane and Joe Sixpack, wouldn't they? But they're not here to serve you and I, are they? Hell no. We are the butt of their jokes. We are the butt of their policy space. We don't matter.
Look, fuckstick, I'm incredibly busy, so why don't you get the hell out of here before I snap your dick off and jam it into your ass?
And so this concept of inflation always comes in trying to make things more challenging for us by hiking up interest rates, making debt more challenging for us, by making the rich win more for our debt slavery, and by turning out the lights on our hopes and dreams. Now, you would think that inflation, we would talk about a issue of demand. Well, demand's, it's not, the inflation's not created by demand. It's clearly gouging. It's not by creating more money and printing more money, because that money never made it to Main Street. That money's in the finance sector, swirling around with the rich people. So it's not money. And yet, all of their solutions come to diminishing the buying power, diminishing the agency, creating more precarity for you and I. Which brings us to the real resources story. And this is pretty fucking funny when you think about it, right? The cost of poop is rising. Round number 3. So fertilizer costs have gone through the roof. During this pandemic, we have not been able to get enough poop to fertilize the lands for the farmers. So what happens when you've got an issue where you don't have enough poop and enough fertilizer for farmers? Food production goes down. What does that do when you have a scarce resource like food, grains, things like that? Well, when you have a scarcity, the cost goes up because there's fewer of it and there's more people that need it. So who would have thought we'd be in poop wars, right? Well, no. The cost of fertilizer has gone through the roof. The government subsidizes farmers in a big way. So in a way, there's really no reason, because of all the buffer stocks that farmers have, that these costs should be passed on to us as consumers. The federal government can serve as a wall between us and the cost increases and subsidize it, do whatever it has to do to prevent inflation from hitting Main Street. But as we've already shown, Joe Biden isn't going to take those steps. Joe Biden isn't going to make things easier for us. With a recession looming, fertilizer shortage beginning, inflation through the roof because of oligarchs and gouging, we have the seeds, if you will, of a major calamity. Now, it may not hurt the rich that much. The rich would probably do just fine. In fact, the investor grade class, they're going to do probably pretty good too, because after all, the entire economy is financialized today. But with the issues going on in Russia and Ukraine being the breadbasket of Europe, a creator of 12% of all of the wheat exports around the globe, 12%, that's huge. During the middle of this war, coupled with the fertilizer issues, coupled with government reducing spending because some ass crystal told them that printing money caused inflation, which it clearly does not. You've got the makings of a meltdown of epic proportions. Do you see how all this ties together? This knockout punch that we're about to go through, this fucking, this insanity is all because most of us don't have a clue how money works, and we attribute the wrong things to the wrong problems. You know, I saw a great picture. We have this picture of the Fed talking about raising interest rates. We've talked about this. And this picture is of an egg sitting on the top of the stove, the frying pan on the wrong burner that's not even lit, and the burner that's being lit. That's the kind of insanity that we're talking about. And if you caught me on the Rogue Scholar the other day, I did this show talking about being Sancho Panza, okay? The Don Quixotes of the world, fighting false battles, misleading us, taking us down directions that are full of shit. Our good guys that don't understand economics, marching, dun, 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 right into the wrong battle, right off the cliff, because they think, oh, wouldn't it be great? I'd be willing to pay a little bit more for healthcare if everybody got some. They're always coming up with these moralizations. The moralizations that keep us in a hellhole, because it's not how it works. It's literally licking the dirt off the oligarch's boot when you do that. They have the money. They don't just have the money, they create the money. Do you understand? It's not like they've been saving up for a long time for a rainy day for us. No. So this poop shortage that is going to directly impact the cost of, think about this, food's gone up. Petroleum's gone up. College education has gone up. Every aspect of our lives is becoming more expensive. And some dipshit out there is going to tell you it's because they've been printing money. Some losercrat is going to tell you it's because they debased the currency. Some knuckle sandwich that doesn't understand econ is going to tell you it's because they're printing money and they're debasing the currency. The only thing we're doing is debasing our food sources. We're debasing our education system. We're debasing our environment. Didn't the IPCC just put something out the other day saying something about shit's getting real? The thing standing in the way of fixing climate change is politics. Well, who'd have thunk it? And why does that matter? Because it's all the misdirection that prevents us from knowing what's going on and being able to take direct action against it. So you start off with Biden not forgiving student debt, having run for office based on giving you checks, based on giving you student debt relief, based on all sorts of stuff. Healthcare? Nah, we're not going to talk about, Medicare, because after all, Biden supported Obama in their neoliberal ACA. So do you think he's going to help you there? Fuck no. Fuck no. He instead is going to sit there and punt the ball into August. Now, you may not realize this, but they've also cut the funding for a lot of the COVID support. So one more financial cut. Think of it economically. Don't think of it just from the pandemic support. Think about reducing that spending once again, making it harder for us. As new variants come out, and there's word that they may be bringing the masks back because all of a sudden new variants are blowing up. China's in fucking lockdown. China's in lockdown. What the fuck? We ever going to get out of this? And so the supply chains could very well come to a halt once again. And instead of focusing on that, they're just punting the ball down the road on student debt. They're literally allowing a fertilizer shortage to drive up the cost of grains and drive up the cost of food production. They're literally allowing oligarchs to jam up the prices of oil, jam up the prices of all the petroleum products we need, literally creating the conditions for persistent and total price rises across sectors. Now, why does this matter? Because you and I, we're the debtors. We're the ones stuck. As they increase interest rates, giving a basic income to the rich once again to people with already have money. As they use their pen to jack up prices without any real meaningful reason for doing so. Every one of these issues fucks you and I. And there they are, the Democrats. Our friends, the ones that in short order you're going to be bludgeoned over the head to rush to support. Because after all, the evil Republicans, and they are evil. And once again, the death spiral continues. Let's wrap this up. Tonight, there's a Status Coup members call tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Members, patrons will get an email link before the Zoom call. Sign up to get the link. Please become a donor if you can. And also remember to check out the next week's Ready to Grumble over here at Status Coup on Thursday nights at 5 p.m. And also, don't forget, check me out, man. I got this kick-ass podcast. It's called Macro and Cheese. You can find it on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple, any of them. Macro, the letter N, Cheese. And don't forget to catch my work over at Real Progress in Action Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the Rogue Scholar on YouTube. I'm Steve Grumbine, and this was another 3-ring haymaker on Let's Get Ready to Rumble. I'm out of here. And